and the individual stories are heartbreaking. So this is personal for me. I grew up in this county. I love this county. I consider the residents of this county my neighbors. And my job and my goal every single day is to make our community safer for all of them, for our children, for those hardworking adults in our community, and for our seniors, for people who are immigrating here from other countries, for people who choose to call Prince George's County home because they've heard great things about it. And you know what? It is a great county and it's a great place to live, grow up, have a career, and live out your twilight years. And to make that a reality, we have to have a safe community. And I am committed to that. In fact, my commitment to accountability and to appropriate prosecutions can be seen through my stats. Last year, we had a 98% conviction rate for our homicides, 98%. You tell me another county in Maryland or across this country who holds people accountable for the most serious crime there is than my office. In addition to that, we know carjackings are an issue. You know, since 2019, my office has indicted 294 carjackings. 294. And I can tell you, when we look at the number of young people who are committing carjackings, it is outrageous. It is concerning. It is heartbreaking. In 2022, we've had 58 individuals, young people who were charged in our system with carjackings. Of those that have been adjudicated, 10 of those young people have been placed in facilities. 23 of them have been placed on probation, and about 23 or so cases are pending. And so we will continue to make appropriate recommendations for all young people who have committed crimes in our community. When we look at our carjackings for our adults who are in our system, we have an equally high conviction rate when it comes to adults in our system, with some trials that are still pending. So we absolutely hold people accountable for serious crimes. We even hold people accountable for what may be considered misdemeanor offenses, because we understand that everyone has to face consequences when they break the law. But let's be clear. In order for us to be able to prosecute cases, we have to have justifiable reasons to move forward to prosecute people here in Prince George's County, which means we have to have probable cause, which means we have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We understand that in our system of justice, people are presumed innocent. However, knowing that, but understanding that in our community, we are still concerned about dangerous people or people who pose a danger to our communities being on our streets even before they are held accountable in a court of law. We often make recommendations for people to be held without bond because we believe that they are a danger to our community. And we make those recommendations every day when we participate in our bond hearings. We're a part of the justice system. We make recommendations, but we are not the final say. We have to respect the decisions of our judges and other judicial officers. We also respect the Department of Juvenile Services and their role in holding young people accountable. And so sometimes we disagree. Sometimes we disagree and we are upset with the decisions of those in the justice system. But our system of justice only works if we all respect everyone's role and we understand the law, which is important. Juvenile law has changed over the past few years. The legislature has enacted new laws that restricts when a juvenile can be held, the rights of a juvenile pretrial, and their rights post adjudication. We have to appreciate that because we are defenders of the law. We don't always agree with it, but we have to uphold the law. And so there have been changes in the law, both case law and statutory changes that have impacted how cases are prosecuted and handled in the state of Maryland. But with all of that, we keep our victims in mind. We also respect the rights of our juveniles who are in the system, and we make appropriate recommendations to our judges. The Department of Juvenile Services has their role too. And sometimes, like I said, we may not agree with them, but we have to respect each other and we have to work together. When it comes to adult crimes, we have, the system is obviously different. We make recommendations to our courts, our judges, as well as our commissioners on whether or not individuals should be held for the crimes in which they were charged. We have to look at the strength of the case. That is part of our evaluation. If the case is not strong, if we don't believe that there's probable cause, it is our duty not to move forward with cases that we can't make. But for those cases that we can make and that we do make every single day in this courthouse, trust me, we keep the community and the victims as our number one priority. So despite what happens in the system, despite the fact that we don't control every part of the system, we are players within the system and we do our job every day. And I'm so very proud of the men and women who work here in the state's attorney's office. I have some of the best prosecutors, victim witness coordinators, paralegals, and other professionals anywhere in this country. I would put my office up against anyone. We do a phenomenal job, but it's not an easy job. It's not an easy job. But what I can say is that we have always done so. We've always worked in a collaborative way. That is what leadership is. Leadership is not about pointing fingers. It's not about saying what I'm doing right and what everyone else is doing wrong. Leadership is about figuring out how we work with everyone in the system to make it better. And I remembered, a few years ago, back in 2011, when the county was facing a very difficult, trying time. Then County Executive Rashawn Baker convened weekly meetings with all of public safety. Didn't point fingers, didn't grandstand, just said, we must work together. How do we do this together? And guess what? They got it done together. And that's what I'm calling on all of Prince George's County to do, to work together collaboratively, the executive, the council, the state's attorney's office, the Department of Juvenile Services, our federal partners. Let's come together in a spirit of collaboration along with our community to address the problems. As the chief said earlier, we're not going to be able to arrest our way out of this. That is true. So we need to look at how we're investing in services in our county, whether it's social service or family services, what we are putting into our schools to ensure that young people are making better choices. And also, we have to work harder to find solutions for our cross-border problems, because a lot of those who we arrest are coming from different jurisdictions. And so it is really important for us, again, to be leaders, to work together. And we need to reinstitute those weekly meetings. I'm here standing saying we need to do this because it is that important to me. I live here, my parents live here, my nieces are growing up here. This is my community too. And what I know is that there is a crisis. But when there's a crisis, we must have cool heads so that we can really think through strategies that will work. And we've started those in my office, and we will continue to work on strategies to hold people accountable. And I look forward to working with my partners in the administration, as well as the police department, the sheriff's department, and our state partners, as well as our federal partners, to address this issue of violence in our community. And I thank you all for being here. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
So if you have any questions, you can please let me know in the chat, and we can promote you up if you would like to turn your video camera on. Otherwise, you can put your questions in the question and answer box. So the floor is now open. Okay. Okay, we do have some questions. I'm gonna bring up Christian Flores. And if you could please identify what station you're with if you're not. See here. Panels. Okay, Christian Flores, you've been promoted, so you can turn on your camera and ask your question.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, yeah, I have a couple questions. The first one, I guess, how do you hold teenagers who are repeat offenders accountable? I mean, how are they being allowed out if they've committed violent crimes? And what is the breakdown in the system if they're being let back to their parents versus being put through the justice system?
Well, let me just say this. Our office makes recommendations often to have individuals held who've committed multiple offenses, or it could be just one offense that's very, very serious. The Department of Juvenile Services also makes recommendations. Okay, you have a defense counsel that's also making recommendations. And ultimately, the judge decides. The judge decides whether or not an individual will be held or will be released, either on monitor or released to their parents.
I have one more question regarding the curfew announced today. I guess what's your office's role in the enforcement of this curfew, and will there be, do you know if there will be patrols everywhere? And I guess, is there a concern as far as, profiling in this curfew? I mean, how do you judge if someone is young enough to be asked to give their ID?
Well, let me say this. This is a decision of the county executive. Those questions would be best addressed by her. My understanding of the statute, we quickly reviewed the statute because, again, you heard about the announcement when we did, or very shortly after we found out about it. And so as we looked at it, the enforcement, the penalties really are civil in nature. And so when it comes to civil kind of penalty crimes, those are typically not handled through our office. Those are handled elsewhere. But again, we will continue to look into it, and whatever role that we can play, we will. But let me just also say that it's important that we continue to police in a way that is constitutional. And that is something that my office will continue to hold everyone accountable for.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Megan Rivers from Channel 9 wants to know, do you think the newly instated curfew will be beneficial? And also she wants to know, do you think the punishments for juveniles need to be more strict?
Well, let me just say this. So with respect to the curfew, I think a properly enforced and constitutionally enforced curfew law, I think would be very helpful, because we have a lot of young people who have, who are unaccompanied, who are out very, very late at night. And it's a problem. It's a problem just for their safety, even if they're not getting into any trouble themselves. The likelihood that they may encounter people that mean them harm is greater. And so I think it is really important to protect our young people by having appropriate hours for them to be unaccompanied in our community. With respect to penalties, let me say this: we do have penalties and harsh penalties for juveniles. The question really is how the judge determines how a juvenile will ultimately be treated. The judge has to look at, obviously, the standard in the law, which is best interest standard. That is not arbitrary. Well, it is in some respects. It is discretionary, what someone believes is in the best interest of the child. You know, from our perspective, our office often believes that consequences and accountability should be a part of any rehabilitation efforts for a young person, making sure that the young person knows that they have to take accountability for what they've done, and also that there will be consequences for such acts. We believe that that's important, and our recommendations align with those core beliefs. Judges, however, can make their own decisions, which sometimes they agree with us and sometimes they don't. But they are also required to consider each child individually. So they will listen to the reports from DJS, any information gleaned from the defense counsel, and their own personal beliefs when making a decision. Again, sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't. But it is the process, and we have to live with it as long as that is the process.
Okay, we have a question from Freddie Kunkel with the Washington Post. Wants to know, well, I think we've already answered this question. So Freddie, if you don't have any more questions or you don't need your question answered anymore, just let me know. We have another one, Kyle Cooper from WTOP. Were you invited to the press conference earlier by Angela Alsobrooks in the police department? Is it fair for the public to assume that your office and the county executive's office and police department are not working together?
I would say that absolutely is not what anyone should get from that. I mean, it is disappointing not to have been invited to such an important press conference. However, we work together every single day. Every time there's a homicide or a major incident in this community, my office is notified. We work very collaboratively with the police department in the execution of search warrants, in reviewing probable cause statements, and handling bond reviews. So we work every single day together. I think what we saw was politics. That's not the norm. This wasn't even a work day, right? So we're talking about a day that agencies are not, in office, although I am at my office today. But we're talking about a day where the courts cannot respond to any of the information provided, that DJS isn't in a position to respond to any of the information that was provided earlier. So it was disappointing. I think it was a mistake because, again, as with any leadership move, you've got to bring everyone together. So I think that was disappointing. However, as professionals, my job is to do my job regardless of the politics. And so that's why we are constantly working with our police department, both our municipal agencies as well as Prince George's County Police Department and other law enforcement partners like our sheriff's office. We do that every single day. So this politics stuff won't interfere with the real work that we do daily.
Okay, and I believe Stephanie Ramirez from Fox 5 had the same question. So unless you have something else, Stephanie, I'm just gonna go to the next question. Okay, Stephanie has another question. So I'm gonna bring you up. Oh. Okay, Stephanie, your question is, do the police then issue the citation if the curfew is a civil matter?
I think that I'm assuming that the police department reviewed the law prior to their press conference. And so those questions can be asked of them.
Okay. And then Megan Rivers from Channel 9, what is your message to parents, these kids who are primarily committing the carjackings, to the kids that are primarily committing the carjackings? What are your message to those parents?
My message is to really talk to your kids, know where they are, make sure that they are not engaging in, criminal behavior. This is a danger. This is a dangerous phenomenon. We're talking about the lives of victims, being compromised. We're talking about their lives being compromised. I know that there have been carjackings in which young people have been injured, shot, those who were committing the carjackings significantly injured. So this is a problem, and we have to care about our young people. We have to know where they are. We have to know where they are. I can't imagine having a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, and not knowing that they're in a whole nother jurisdiction with a weapon, pointing it at somebody, taking their car, taking their possessions. As a parent, you cannot believe that that is acceptable. You have to know where your kids are. You have to hold them accountable, and you can't assume they're good. You can't assume that they are getting influenced by so many different things, whether it's social media, their friends. Parents have to be more engaged, more involved. You got to take accountability too. But this is a problem. This is a huge problem. And I pray for our young people every single day. I pray for them. And I pray for the parents too, because I know a lot of parents are just trying to make ends meet, and they're doing the best that they can, but we got to do more. We got to do better. And if you're having problems supervising your children, tell someone. Before it gets out of hand, tell somebody. Go to your local family services, go to the schools, let them know, let somebody know you need help. That's why government is here, to help, not just to arrest, but we do that too when it's appropriate, but also to help. And we need to know when our families are in crisis so that we can provide them the help that they need.
Okay, I believe that's it for questions. And with that, we want to thank everybody for attending, and thank you again. And that concludes this press conference.
Thanks.